Okay. I like it. We'll do it that way. We'll do it that way. I've actually done a few events already today, so this is my last one of the day. Previously, we used to do many tastings. I'd have to fly around the country to do my tastings as a whiskey expert, and uh, this is really fun because I'm sitting in my house, but I was able to do a tasting in Texas, and I did one in Kentucky, and I'm doing one in California now. So that's kind of a silver lining to this whole thing. So who is from Alpine Hills?
No, I'm at my house, Rosalie.
No, I mean like representing from it.
Well, hi, I'm Ken Knox with Winebow.
Hi, how are you, Ken?
Hi, Heather.
Nice to see you.
Love your spirits. They're the bomb. So yeah, I've been with the company 17 years.
Oh, fabulous.
I've been calling on Alpine for about 15 years. So they're really good. They're really good partners.
Fantastic. I'm excited to start hanging out with you all. So what I'll do is I'll let you guys settle down and get all your stuff ready, and I'll get myself a little glass of whiskey, and we'll get going soon.
Hi, Rosalie.
There was an email that
I'm not physical Zoom. We're all together.
Good to see you as well. I'm in my car,
How's
so
everything at the
sorry. You can tell by the boxes.
You guys let me know when you're ready. You can warm up the crowd.
Always ready for good whiskey, Heather.
Well, I have a funny story, actually, speaking of which. So as I told you, I've already done two tastings and a video. I had to do a video for a newsletter that we do. We have a Milam and Green newsletter, and we always do something fun and humorous. And today I talked about a cocktail called the Boilermaker, which is a shot in a beer. We did like 5 takes of it. So I'm like, woohoo! It's Friday night.
Remote. That's son of a bitch.
Is he doing? Yeah, he might be doing remote.
Let's say 1 of 2. We were muted, right? Good. I wasn't in there.
and these are what you're going to be tasting. All right.
It's like for somebody with my eyesight.
All right, everybody.
How are you? I'm good.
Raise your hand if you're logged in the meeting. Everybody, anybody having trouble? 292. Everybody have a little sound.
La 13, los 12 restados son 13 menos 12, gana 1. ¿Ya te entiendes?
It's on me.
O sea, los entonces ella tenía 12 malos, pero sumó ahorita 13 buenos.
Hi, Matt. How you doing?
Hey, what's up, Ken? Good to see you.
Hi, Matt.
Yo voy.
Good to see you as well.
Matt, you like that photo I sent you today?
Yeah, I almost didn't recognize you.
I'll share that with everybody. I'll tell everybody about what that is when you guys are ready. Oh, it says you're ready. I just got a chat. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to talk to you guys about whiskey. So my name is Heather Green. I'm your host this evening, and you're in good hands. I am a whiskey expert. I am an author. I drink whiskey for breakfast, and I have for 20 years. At least, and that's to say you're in very good hands about the world of whiskey. But most recently in my career, I am now the CEO and the master blender of a company called Milam and Green. And you guys, as far as I understand, you have some samples from us, which shocks me because I don't know if you guys have maybe read the news, but Texas was in a bit of a mess last week. So I think you were able to, did you all, let me see, do you all have whiskey? And can I see? Oh my God, it actually made it. I can't believe it. I mean, this is like, I've never seen anything like it. So just a little background. I actually was born in Michigan and I grew up in Western Massachusetts and New York. So the snow doesn't bother me, the cold doesn't bother me, but what happened here was like nothing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like that was completely insane. And I will tell you more about it if you have any questions, but I'm a hardy Northeasterner and this was pretty crazy. So wow, I just can't believe it. My staff really made a lot of efforts to make sure you guys got the whiskey, the labels, the stuff. And as of yesterday, we were calling FedEx to try to get that out of Texas. So I'm really excited that you guys have that. We're really excited about our brand. So just a quick show of hands. I see a lot of faces here. And I think what we're here to do is celebrate whiskey, not only just celebrate our brands, and now I'm celebrating the fact that this small business was able to actually achieve what it did just for you guys in this crazy storm. But I want to teach you about whiskey in general. I want to lay a platform. I want you guys to have fun. I want you to understand you're from Northern California. You guys get wine. How do you approach whiskey? How do you even think about it? So I'm going to make a guess, but I don't know, that this is a group that doesn't have tons of familiarity with whiskey. So if you guys can get on the chat or give me a show of hands, how many people drink whiskey regularly? Okay, we've got a few. How many are this like new and you're just feeling like, hey, you know what? A good overview would be good. Any of those hands? A couple? One or two? Okay, few. Yeah. Don't be shy. So as I said, I wrote a book on whiskey called Whiskey Distilled, A Populist Guide to the Water of Life. It was New York Times shortlisted. I've been in the whiskey industry for a really long time now for whiskey. Whiskey's been around for many years, a few hundred, maybe even 1,000. We don't know yet. We're still doing research on that. I've been in it for quite a while and worked in Scotland, worked in Japan, wrote books, worked in American whiskey. So I'm here to sort of like your whiskey guru, your whiskey person to bring you through that world and help you really understand the beauty of whiskey. And what you're drinking tonight are American whiskeys. You're drinking Milam and Green. I'm Heather Green and of Milam and Green, and I am the master blender. I'm one of the whiskey makers, along with a woman named Marlene Holmes, who was with a company called Jim Beam, and she was with them for 27 years. Jim Beam is a Kentucky whiskey. It is one of the gold standards, one of the historic companies in the world for making whiskey. And that's, she was born and raised on a farm there in Bardstown, Kentucky, and came down and started making whiskey with Milam and Green about 3 years ago. So we also have this amazing brewer. His name is Jordan Osborne, and he is somebody who creates the mash and the yeast recipe. You need, of course, yeast, as you guys know. Of course, even in wine country, you need yeast to create alcohol and all of that good stuff and goodness. So he actually is somebody who creates essentially the beer to go into distillation for whiskey. And then I round out the team by, I'm a blender and a batcher and a whiskey expert, and I've been tasting whiskey for a really long time and thousands of whiskeys. So my goal with our team is to create a whiskey that is beautiful, that is elegant, that is for whiskey drinkers by people who love and are passionate about whiskey, and for whiskey that can really, one of the things we knew as a craft distiller and a small business is that to survive, we had to make a whiskey that could compete with the greatest whiskeys on the shelf. Otherwise, as a small business, you're just not going to be able to survive. So one of the things that we did when we created this company and started making whiskey is to say, what do we think is a beautiful whiskey? Like how do we make sure that everything in a Milam and Green bottle is something where you guys will look at it on the shelf and say, they make great whiskey. Like, how do we do that? How do we please that palate? How do we please that whiskey palate? And then backtrack and create our whiskey series based on that. So tonight I'm going to take you through our whiskey. I'll take you through whiskey in general, and then I'll open it up to some questions and answers. So whiskey is an umbrella term. Whiskey is wherever water, yeast, and grain happened around the world, some crafty person probably made whiskey out of it. Okay, so we see whiskey in Scotland, we see whiskey in Ireland, we see whiskey in Japan, all these northern regions where you tend to see grains, you'll have seen somebody create whiskey out of that. So whiskey in Scotland is called Scotch. A+, who did that? Okay, you get a gold star. Whiskey from Scotland is Scotch. Whiskey from Ireland is Irish whiskey, right? Whiskey from Japan is Japanese whiskey. Now, in Scotland, we have 5 different kinds of whiskey. There's many different kinds of Scotch. In Ireland, there's many different kinds of Irish whiskey. In America, we have many different kinds of whiskey here too. American whiskey, our 2 predominant kinds are bourbon and rye. Now, we have other kinds of whiskeys, but those make about 99.9% of whiskey drinking in the United States is we have bourbon and rye. And today you are drinking, what do you have? You have 2 or 3? Do you have a bourbon and a rye? Oh, you got the big stuff? You got 3? I'm excited about that. Okay, excellent. So that I'll made that to you. You have 3 kinds. You've got 2 bourbons and a rye. And then I'll tell you a little bit about how we do that. So if whiskey is this umbrella term, and around the world we have all these different kinds of whiskeys, and in America we have bourbon and a rye. Well, now we can take that bourbon and a rye, and there's tons of ways we can make bourbon and rye, right? Like how we bottle it. So the laws by which we call a bourbon, does anybody know what bourbon must be made from?
Kentucky.
No?
Corn.
Corn, 51% corn.
51% corn. And this is a really, really great question, is that bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States. That was signed into law in 1964 by Lyndon Johnson. So, and who's interestingly from Johnson City, Texas, which is right next door to where our distillery is. But in 1964, it became a United States American designation. However, I will say this. If you are in Kentucky and you're in a dive bar and you're hanging out with a bunch of Kentuckians, you might just not want to talk about that. Just say it's from Kentucky. But legally, just in the regular, just know that actually bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States. Now, Kentucky, so, you guys know there's a lot of shenanigans in politics, but during Prohibition, they were able to continue making whiskey through Prohibition because somebody in Kentucky had a handshake deal with somebody in DC and they got special, what they call medicinal licenses. So after Prohibition, Kentucky was like, you could turn the switch. Now, everybody else in the United States who pre-Prohibition that was making predominantly rye, to be honest, especially in Maryland and Virginia and all the Northeast, they were shut down. So when Prohibition ended and everybody could make whiskey again, Kentucky just basically turned the key and we're like, we're ready to go. Everybody else, it's taken this long to get back up and running. So bourbon can be made anywhere in the United States. We do have laws though. We are under strict parameters under what we can call a whiskey. So bourbon whiskey. So as you guys know, probably, and whenever I meet people from Northern California, they just know so much about wine. So you just know that you guys aren't allowed to call your sparkling wine champagne, right? Like you don't call it California champagne, you call it California sparkling wine, right? Or cava from Spain. It's the same thing. So in France, they own the term essentially champagne. So America owns bourbon, but in order to be called a bourbon, we also have all sorts of things that we have to do to be called a bourbon. And one of those is like aged. We have to be aged in new oak. Okay, so that becomes a very important part of what a whiskey tastes like in America. So American whiskeys have to be aged in new oak, bourbon and rye. And in order to be called a bourbon, you have to be made with 51% corn. And then there's all sorts of technical details about what the barrel proof, meaning the ABV to fill a barrel, how we empty that, all that kind of stuff goes in there as well. But essentially then we're regulated by ABV, and then that's how we so bourbon and rye are very uniquely American whiskeys. Now, as a whiskey maker, I have all these rules under which I have to make a bourbon and rye. All that stuff is in a warehouse, right? And then I go into the warehouse, and now I have some decisions to make. I've got a warehouse full of casks, and this is going to go straight into what you're drinking now. I have a warehouse full of casks. How do I use those casks? Now, if I were to take one barrel is about 280 bottles. And I were to take one barrel, and this is something you're going to know now when you're sitting at the bar with your friends. It's one barrel will yield about 280 bottles. It's about 53 gallons. That's what an American typical barrel is. Now, if I were to take that barrel and bottle 280 bottles and sell that as a bourbon, what can I call that? Any guesses? Single barrel. One single barrel. So now you know when you go to the store and you see single barrel whiskey, you now know that those are bottles probably, and what you have in your hand is one of 280 bottles. It comes out of one single barrel. So each barrel is going to have a slight variance amongst them because there's a lot of mystery in terms of like terroir and how it ages and the way the sun hit it in the warehouse and things like that. And my job as a whiskey blender, whiskey bottler, whiskey maker is to make sure that what you are drinking is rich, it's beautiful, and it tastes good. So go ahead and have a sip of your single barrel bourbon. That's Milam and Green bourbon. That's a single barrel whiskey in a 53-gallon barrel, aged 4 years. Now that is a Tennessee whiskey, actually. So we do a lot of things at Milam and Green. One of the things that we're very transparent. We do things a little bit differently than other craft distilleries in the United States. And we'll get in a little bit into that later. But one of my passions, which I learned living in Scotland for many years, is I love finding beautiful barrels doing interesting things to them, bottling them and selling them. Now, some people call that a sourced whiskey. I call it independent bottling and tremendous skill and great relationships, because to get the right barrels, you have to have the right relationships. So our single barrel program, what you have is Milam & Green single barrel. Every year we release a small amount of single barrels. We'll have a small amount in California. And then over the years, I will always find some special barrels to bottle. Some of them will be maybe our single barrels from our own, from Kentucky, from Texas, from Tennessee. I mean, I would even be opening it up to other parts of the world too. So that is your single barrel whiskey. That is a traditional bourbon. So as I said, 51% corn, and that's aged 4 years. And what I find about this bourbon, actually, it's exactly what I'm drinking right now. And so what I love about this whiskey, it hits a really nice, it's just a nice, rich whiskey. Each one has a different personality. And when it comes to single barrels, like the idea is you don't really touch it too much, right? So you just make sure that it's really beautiful, really rich, really great, and you have a great source. You know exactly how to bottle that. Is there a special way to taste like you do with wine? I love that question. So don't overthink it. That's really my best, absolute best advice. When you're drinking whiskeys, you don't want to overthink it. What you want to do, I mean, I obviously, now I'm drinking it in a tumbler. I like tumblers when I drink whiskey. I don't know, I like small. What are you guys drinking out of? Some vintage, some tumblers. I see some restaurant tumblers. Okay, so good. I actually like that. Now, when you see whiskey geeks, they sometimes drink out of really precious, crazy stuff, like little, you know, like, oh, it's got to be this and got to be that. And my feeling is a whiskey is not like wine in that you can actually, part of it is like, how does it feel? How does it look? How do you want to sit at a bar and enjoy it? And for me, as a whiskey person, I drink it in a rocks glass. It is warm. So somebody's asking ice or no ice. Absolutely. Put ice on it. It's great. In fact, this is fantastic with ice. So go ahead and add ice to it. Your whiskey. And to get really technical, I can get as technical as you guys want. There's a lot of you here, so I don't want to lose you, but the wider the opening for whiskey, very different than wine. So there's a lot more ethanol. You guys know what ethanol is, right? That's the molecule. That is the alcohol molecule. It's very strong. And in some of these very specific whiskey glassware, you get a huge burst of ethanol, which can essentially anesthetize your receptors here. And it's a very difficult thing to come back from. It's like an ice cream freeze, right? Like 30 minutes or so. You also don't tend, I think, to get as many aromatics as I like to get in one shot. So not literally a shot, in one go, I should say. So a wide rimmed bourbon, rocks glass for bourbon, I really love because the ethanol escapes and all the other beautiful aromatics. You get it all. So from my perspective, and I will say that I'm somebody who has always been a bit of a, I guess, disruptor, or somebody who's spoken my mind, and I love to be driven by science, not by like marketing hocus pocus. As much as I love beautiful, dainty whiskey tasting glasses, I think for most people, this is the way to go. You're going to get the ethanol and the molecules of all the other beautiful elements that come out of a whiskey, from the cask, from the mashing, from the fermentation. You want those beautiful flavors. Whiskey is created like literally a perfume, right? Perfume is suspended in alcohol. You want all those beautiful, rich aromatics. That's what distillation is. It's taking that low wine is what they call it, and you're heating it to extract those beautiful aromatic molecules and the steam and some of the ethanol, condensing it into a nice rich liquid, right? So we want all that flavor. We're putting it in a cask. We get all that gorgeous flavor from the casks over years. So I like a wide mouthed glass because I want all of that flavor at once. ice is great. So in our glass of whiskey, you've got all these, I mean, what gives something a taste or smell are literally aromatic compounds. They are molecular compounds. I know I'm getting a little geeky here, but that's exactly what is you're smelling and tasting. You're smelling molecules off a rose or your garden, anything, cookies. They're actually going into your nose and sending a message to your brain that tells you what it is you're smelling or tasting. So inside a whiskey, we have all these smelly molecules, they call it. And ice is another molecule, H2O, and you're adding it to join the party. And by ice going in, you're condensing flavors and you're allowing some to pop or volatilize, and you're allowing some to mitigate. So that's why I like ice, because it's a way to play with your whiskey. Actually, you can use it. I find it refreshing. Texas is warm normally. And I really love ice in my whiskey. I always have. I think that's fantastic. So somebody else asked about the proof of our single barrel. So proof in a whiskey is essentially the ABV, or alcohol by volume. So if you see proof and it says like 110, divide it by half, and that is your ABV. Or if you're looking at a Scotch label and they call it ABV, just double it. That's your proof. And proof is a very interesting thing. So what you do in Scotland, like if you're in Scotland or Japan and they give you a, actually, let me back up. Remember when I told you I went into a warehouse and I have a decision to make? I can take all those whiskeys from one barrel and put it into bottles, right? And that's a single barrel. I have another decision to make. I can add water to it or not as well before I bottle. That's proofing. So if I add water, I'm lowering the proof. If I keep it just purely out of a cask, that's called cask strength or barrel proof. You with me? So a lot of the art of whiskey is the decisions how we bottle from those casks. Is it a single barrel? Is it barrel proof or cask strength? And so what I think about is when I talk about proofing, it's either I'm going to add the proof water, but what the consumers often don't know, and I see this time and time again in America, is that your job is to either, if you see it cask strength or barrel proof whiskey, you add the water yourself to the perfect palate for you. And too often I see people say, barrel proof whiskey, I can't drink it, or it's too strong. The idea is you're supposed to add it to find that great percentage that works for you. It could be ice, it could be water. So proof is a very interesting thing. It doesn't mean that when you're adding water, either whether I do it before I bottle it, unless your bottle at a shelf in a store says barrel proof, unless you see that, they have proofed it for you. So they always tell you if it's barrel proof. The whiskey you're drinking, I've already proofed, and I will go through it and find that right proof, because like I said, H2O goes up and down and up and down. It plays with all the molecules. Like you can proof a whiskey down, add a little water, and it tastes worse. Add a little more, then it tastes better again. Add a little more, it tastes even better. Add a little, and then you've lost it. So it's never just not just linear. It actually, like I said, it goes up and down. So you're drinking a proofed single barrel whiskey bourbon. So now you know a lot more, right? I hope you understand single barrel, you understand barrel proof, you understand how you're supposed to drink barrel proof. I've proofed that for you. We do have barrel proof whiskeys that are for sale. Now, somebody asked about cheese. I know you have some beautiful cheeses with you. And for me, what does cheese do for whiskey? So when you guys are drinking today, so you have your single barrel and you're going to have this beautiful piece of cheese. What you want to do with cheese? You want to do do you guys have a piece of cheese in front of you? Have you started yet? Okay, great. I like to have a whiskey and then a cheese, a whiskey and a cheese. You go back and forth. The fats of a cheese, the proteins, the fatty proteins coat your mouth. It softens that ethanol from the whiskey. It softens that high proof, and it basically makes that whiskey taste even smoother. It tastes like how it enhances both somehow. So go ahead and enjoy the sum of the experience of both whiskey and cheese. And you can do the same with chocolate and meats and high fatty foods. So there's nothing to me better than a dessert of whiskey and cheese. I mean, we're talking like it's heaven to me. And I believe that we chose, was it cheddar? I think it's cheddar with your single barrel.
Yeah, I'm seeing thumbs up from a couple people.
Okay, cool. So yeah, so cheddar is like sharp. It's very, cheddar is sharp. It's got a nice pungency and it should really mellow out that single barrel. I want to switch to the triple cask now because I know I'm trying to give you guys a lot of information at once. This is a different kind of whiskey. So if one is a single barrel, this one is 3 different casks that come together. So this is where the art of somebody like myself or a blender comes into play. Now I go into a warehouse and I think, okay, we're ready to create a whiskey. How do we go ahead and do that? Well, this one is very, very interesting because what I wanted to do was create a whiskey that hits in 3 different parts of your palate, right? I'm a whiskey drinker. I don't want a thin whiskey. I don't like that. I don't want something that bangs me over the head either, right? So I don't want something like super high proof. I don't want something that is very so alcoholic that I can't taste anything else. And believe me, there's a lot of those people out there that are like, give me the highest proof whiskey. And I think, well, I would say, like what else are you tasting if it's too high proof? So think about that. Like you don't want it to be overpowered. So the triple cask whiskey with your Manchego cheese. Triple cask is a beautiful whiskey drinker's whiskey. I say this is my everyday whiskey. So this is 3 casks that come together. And the idea is that I want you to see if you can taste some sweetness and vanilla on the tip of your tongue. That same creaminess, that vanilla you got on your single barrel across the mid palate. And then a pop of spice and real structure like tannin that you might find in a red wine on the back end. And that was what we tried to do with that triple cask whiskey. There are 2 whiskeys from Tennessee. One is aged 4 years. So that single barrel you had is a constituent in the triple cask. It's one of the casks we use. It's 12-year-old whiskey. And then also a 2-year-old whiskey from a 300-gallon, just a tiny little pot still that we do in Blanco. So go ahead and see if you can get that. Have a sip, have a taste of your Manchego, and then go ahead and have a triple cask. And then I'm gonna have you do something else real quick. So go ahead and taste that. Enjoy how it hits the 3 parts of your palate. And if you're having any issues with that, I've got something that'll change your mind on it. Take a sip of the triple cask and hold it in your mouth for 7 seconds, 7 to 10 seconds. I'll do it with you. Now swallow. Do you feel that pop of spice in the back? Did you get that spice? Did you get that little surprise? I love that. That's that Texan whiskey spice mixed with a little bit of that old tannic whiskey from Tennessee. And to me, that if you can have that full experience, that makes me really, really happy. So when we talk about whiskey, we look at nosing, tasting, texture, and I would call that a finish. If you're a rookie, you can call it a burn. Like, ooh, that burns. So if you did a shot of like Jack Daniels at some point in your life, you would call it a burn. I call it a finish. But you guys are from Northern California, so you know how to do that elegant wine talk, right? You can do that here too. So I love that. That is our triple cask. That's 3 different whiskeys that come together. So I basically go into the warehouse. So essentially, like, it's not really one warehouse. We have 3 warehouses, 3 in Tennessee, 1 in Kentucky, and 2 in Texas. So I have a proverbial spice cabinet, and I think with my team, like, how are we going to make something really beautiful that we think people are going to enjoy? And that's what we did. And that is the beauty. And then I'm just crazy about this triple cask. It's an everyday beautiful sipping whiskey. Over time, my job is to make sure that triple casks tastes exactly as it tastes now or better. So we constantly experiment. We have our aging warehouses in Kentucky and Tennessee, and I constantly work with that to make sure that triple cask has that beautiful flavor. I want the front, the mid, and the back palate. I want it to sit in that the price range where it is. I want it to be your really, and let's say you don't want to open a bottle of wine. I want you to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to open a bottle of wine tonight, but what I am going to do is sip a beautiful glass of triple cask whiskey on the rocks and cook my dinner or grill my fish, or that to me is my dream for you guys. Like that would mean that I was successful as a whiskey maker. But that's where whiskey should sit. You should have those aromatics. You should have that experience. And by the way, I do drink whiskey out of a wine glass. I've been known to do that. A nice big wine glass with ice. There's nothing wrong with that. And to be honest, when I was writing my book, I was doing research with the Monell Chemical Senses Institute. They're part of UPenn network in Pennsylvania. They're some of the top researchers in the world on olfaction and tasting. And they had just finished a major study. This is a fun little tidbit that is never public, funded by a big glassware maker on how to drink wine. Was for wine, actually, wine, and then they did some spirits, how to use glassware, and they blindfolded people and they put their hands behind their back and they did tasting notes. And what they actually found was that there wasn't that big of a difference in some of them. So you can, as long as your mouth is really open, you can drink it out of a wine glass. So a little fun tidbit for you. And when it was really tight for spirits, that's when they found quite a difference. So you actually can drink whiskey out of a wine glass. I enjoy that. And I want to stop for a second. Someone asked, how does the whiskey get its color? I'm so glad you asked that. Whiskey goes into a cask, white, moonshine. All of the color you see is purely the wood of the whiskey, the wood in the cask. That is literally the color of a tree. And I am I'm passionate about the trees. I feel like when we sip whiskey, we should honor these beautiful oak trees that have given up their life. I mean, I might get a little weird about it, but they've given up our lives to create whiskey for us. And most of our barrels come from the Ozarks, Missouri, and America, and actually the world. We actually send whiskey barrels around the world from this region of the United States. And that's where whiskey gets its color. So trees are created into casks. Cask, another bar tidbit for you when you're sitting at the bar, say, did you know that cask is actually an umbrella term? Cask is the overall term. Barrel is a unit of measure. It's a type of cask. It's 53 gallons. So trees are cut and they can make barrels, or they can make port pipes, which is what port is created in, or sherry butts. You probably heard that word maybe, or hogshead. So there's different units of measure. So these trees are cut into staves and they're hoops around the edges to hold them together. And a great cooper is much like a ship maker. You don't want any of your water or your whiskey getting through. And the whiskey is aged in there, and what happens is the ethanol goes into the little wood nooks and crannies, because the wood is made of 3 ingredients, primarily cellulose, hemicellulose, and lignins. That's what holds wood together. Lignin is like glue. So you think of a celery stalk. The celery is like the cellulose and the hemicellulose, but what holds it together is the glue, is the lignins, it's called. And the ethanol gets in and breaks down a lot of that lignin. It gives whiskey its color and flavor. That's where it comes from over time. So another question. So now you know where whiskey gets its color. We do not color our whiskey. That is just purely you're drinking the beauty of an oak tree over time. Is there an advantage to using used wine barrels as well? We have done tons of experimentation in wine barrels, and it just like if you take a wine barrel and you just age whiskey in it, it doesn't work. Like they're just not the right wood. It's not seasoned correctly. But what can work, what is interesting, I've seen is using your whiskey to age it in a bourbon barrel. Like, so in order to be called bourbon, it has to be aged in brand new oak. So meaning they take the tree, they make the casks, you put your whiskey in it. That's brand new oak. And why we even say that brand new, of course you would use brand new oak. No, you wouldn't. Over in Scotland, they use our old barrels, just like you're suggesting with the wine. Wine doesn't work, but it's a great finishing agent. So I have seen wine barrels being used for finishing whiskey. So once I do my whiskey aging in a brand new oak barrel, I can throw that into a wine finish if I wanted to. I haven't yet found one that I love other than the third one. This is a great, I don't know, you guys, you teed me up for this one, I think, is your port wine is next, right? So go ahead and have a taste of your port rye. I did find one that tasted good, and I will say port works great. So go ahead. This is Port Pipes, your port cask that came over from Portugal. And we brought those into Hill Country, Texas, and we did exactly what you suggested. So we took rye whiskey, we aged that because also rye is the same laws as bourbon. We must age that in brand new oak using 51% rye. Then we took that and put that into port pipes. Now port, these beautiful ruby red ports, you're going to notice there's like a richness, there's like a dark cherry, a chocolate, a tannin note. I like it like a toffee, a caramel. That is from the port wine that has been in that cask before we got it. So it comes to Hill Country. And what happens with whiskey, unlike wine, is like wine is not so much, you're not really thinking as much about the casks as you are in whiskey. So the casks, because they're sitting in there for so long, we're looking at them breathe, and wood in hot weather expands and in cold weather it contracts. In humidity, it changes. And this will affect the rate and the type and the infusion of flavor, like a tea bag. Think of like first dunk of a tea bag is the strongest. So that's your brand new oak barrel. The second time it's a little mellower and it keeps mellowing out. So your rye, your port finished rye is sitting in this Texan Hill Country sun, and it expands. And then you see what happened last week. But a big surprise to me is that last week was an anomaly, but it actually does get quite cold in Texas in the winter. So it contracts and expands and it contracts and expands. And that's just those lignans, and that's all those beautiful flavors in the wood are just infusing right into that rye. And I think I would love to know what you think, but I suggested blue cheese. I think you're drinking that port finished rye with blue cheese because I just feel like that port, that beautiful tannic of the toffee, dark cherry would pair really well with like a nice blue cheese. So I'm hoping that works out well for you guys. I kind of love port with cheeses, so blue cheeses. So I thought that might work. And that's a little bit about that wine. So whoever asked about the wine barrels, you really teed me up for the third whiskey on this tasting. I'd love to open it to some more questions, and I feel like I'm just talking at you. I mean, I will keep talking and teach you as much as you want about whiskey. I'm here for you guys tonight, as you could possibly want. No question is dumb to me. And just your feedback and what you guys think.
I'll just throw in a comment. Hi guys, I work with Heather and have worked with Heather actually in many previous lives. My name is Matt. One of the things with pairing, cheeses and wine or spirits or anything else that is sort of a great rule of thumb. Well, two things. I'll give you two. One rule of thumb: if it grows together, it goes together. So generally, Spanish wine and Spanish cheese tend to go really well together. So a lot of like American things like American cheddar go really well with American whiskey, American wine, things like that. And then also sort of the opposite way of thinking, opposites attract. So sweet wine with salty cheese or blue cheese that has that like almost like really minerally centric sort of flavor. So that's why I think the port finish with blue cheese is actually a match made in heaven. It's really nicely done, Heather. So in general, like one of my favorite like discoveries as a young waiter way back was when somebody did a cheese pairing class and they're like, who likes Riesling? And everybody was kind of like, it's a little sweet, I don't know. And she's like, take a bite of that blue cheese and now take a sip of that Riesling. And you're like it's a whole nother world. So I hope it worked out this time.
Yeah, I love when it just creates something new, like two things create something new. You know, I just love that. And for me as a whiskey person, that's what all these different casks do, is create something bigger than the sum of its parts. So I love single barrel, but I also love taking all the stuff and putting it together and playing with it. And then you have that, and then you can put it with food. I'm in heaven. What do you guys think?
I have a question.
Hi, Megan.
Hi. So I've never drank straight whiskey before. I've only had a drink called the Sazerac, which is a New Orleans drink made with, and I love that drink, but it has sugar in it, absinthe and bitters.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about whiskey-based drinks like that? Like,
I love a delicious Sazerac. What I would ask you to do with, okay, so you're new to drinking whiskey neat. So for you, I would absolutely put this on ice, put this on the rocks. And on our whiskeys, because we spend so much time with aromatics, if you have a grapefruit, oh my God, you're in California, you have grapefruit and oranges, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So what I really would encourage you to do, if you have it, if any of you have it right now, go and get a peel of your grapefruit or your orange, not part of the fruit, just the peel. Twist it, get the orange essence in that in your triple cask or the grapefruit in your port finished rye, and you will be the happiest woman on earth. We call it the simple serve. So you can make what essentially feels like a cocktail without the sugar, without the bitters, without all that work. And it's like a great way to go from neat without having to do a cocktail, but have those enhanced experience with just beautiful fruit essence. It's so good. And I love spirit forward whiskey cocktails. So Sazerac, Boulevardier, Manhattans, and Old Fashions. Those are probably my favorite stirred drinks. So Megan, I'm all for it. And I think actually the nicer the whiskey, with a whiskey sour, you could argue, or like a blended drink or drinks that you shake, right? So anything that has like egg whites and fruit and sugar combined and like kind of frothy, you can get away with a whiskey that doesn't taste so great, or that isn't, I don't want to use the word cheaper, but a cheaper whiskey, right? But if you are making a Sazerac or an Old Fashioned or a Manhattan, like these are stirred, boozy, whiskey forward drinks. And it does make a difference to have a really beautiful whiskey for those, because they are predominantly whiskey-based drinks. So those are the drinks that you stir. There's stirred drinks and shaken drinks. So the stirred drinks or Sazerac is what you mentioned. I would stick with a nice whiskey for that.
So you're saying pour the whiskey in the glass like the rye, and then take a peel of an orange or a grapefruit and put it in the glass with the, and that's it.
You know how to express oil. That's it. And you will
juice, just the rind. Okay.
Yeah, just the oil of the rind, and you stir it in, and you'll have, so what Matt was saying about that enhanced experience. So some of the notes in the triple cask whiskey are orange blossom and honey and vanilla. So when you add orange to that, just orange peel, you have literally a cocktail in a glass, because there's already 3 casks and all that. And then your port finished rye, again, you've got port, you've got vanillas in there, you've got dark cherries, and port and grapefruit goes so well together. So if you add a little grapefruit in there, that's all you need.
Okay, I'm gonna do it right now.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Do it and tell us.
So Heather, you had like 3 come in. I'm gonna probably lead you towards Charlie and Renee's question of when did you start the brand, and if you want to like roll that into a little bit about the distillery itself. where it's based and
Sure.
other
Oh,
features in it?
thank you, Matt. So we started, so there's the brand on the market and the brand in your head are two different things, right? Because whiskey takes some time. So the brand was born almost probably 5 years ago. My partner, Marcia Milam, started this brand, a small kind of a beta brand 5 years ago. And then Milam and Green was born. That's a partnership between her and I 3 years ago, and in Texas. And so we're in Blanco, Texas. I'm from New York. She's from Illinois, but she's been here since for a while. Marlene's from Kentucky. Jordan is a beer maker from Colorado. We all kind of worked together for the past, I'd say 3 years now to create this whiskey. So this whiskey that you're drinking has been, the business has been about 3 years in the making. So we started the brand 3 years ago. Now that's very young for a craft distillery, but as I said, we do things a little bit differently. So we knew that we needed to create whiskey out of the gate that was really beautiful, really amazing, really delicious. And so we harnessed the history of whiskey making in Japan and Scotland and Ireland and America to say, how do we make our own? We distill and we make our own, and we use the whole palette of American whiskey and partners to create something really special and unique. So Milam and Green is based in Blanco, Texas. I mean, it is gorgeous there. It is. If you guys are ever in Texas, please come and tell me you're here. It's really beautiful. It's 3 seasons really. I mean, right now it's cold, but then it gets beautiful bluebonnets and wildflowers in the spring, and hiking and rushing fresh water in all the rivers. And it's karst country. So it's like hills, like very quick hills. There's caves and hiking, and it's just beautiful. It's Willie Nelson lives there. Paul Simon now lives there. You know, like a lot of artists have moved there. It's just stunning. It gets hot as hell in the summer, rattlesnakes and scorpions, and you literally fly fishing and whiskey. Yes, there's a lot of fly fishing in hill country. And really, it's kind of amazing because you fly to Austin or San Antonio, it's a 40-minute drive. So I live in South Austin. The distillery is in the middle of hill country. And that's where our distillery is. And as I said, like what we're finding, you've probably heard of there's a couple of other distilleries that are based there, Garrison Brothers. We have Andalusia. There's a couple others, and there actually is a burgeoning wine, Fredericksburg wine down there. It's like a really crazy little place of food and wine and whiskey now. And it's just quite beautiful. So that's where hill country is. So if you fly to Austin or San Antonio, you just drive 45 minutes and you're there. And that's what it is. It's a very, very, very special place. You can jump in the rivers, it's beautiful. It's not California. I got you. It's not California, but there's a lot of Northern Californians who move here. They're like, this isn't California. We're like, we get it. It's not California. But it is really beautiful. And like I said, I'm not from here either, but there's a lot of us moving here. It's a very special place, I think. Big sky.
Heather, another one I would point you to from the chat that somebody asked about was what makes a good whiskey smooth and a bad whiskey harsh? A little bit of a pointer. And then Galaxy Tab A will get to you after that, I think.
Okay, so that's a tough question, because one person's smooth whiskey is another person's harsh whiskey. It's really about your familiarity and your palate. I would say when people say a whiskey is harsh, there could be a lot of things. So whiskey, traditionally, a lot of it came from Scotland, like the blended whiskeys with peat and smoke. So that can taste harsh to people. But if you're from Scotland, peat and smoke is kind of what you grew up with. So it's not harsh to them. It's really an interesting question. And something I talk about a lot in my book is that palate is subjective. So one person can be like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever tasted because they're so familiar with it. And somebody else would think it's the harshest thing ever. So you could say like let's say you grew up drinking you were in, I have a second book I hope comes out soon, but I did some work in vodka in Poland and Russia. So like they're very used to very hard, like shots of vodka. So for them, they could drink some moonshine and be like, that's fine. For somebody else, it would be really harsh. I would say in general, though, harshness can come from, one of the things to mitigate harshness, that can come from high ABV. And if you're used to drinking wine or cocktails where the ABV is much lower and you just approach whiskey and you do a quick shot, that physically, from a mechanics point of view, will shock your body and it will taste harsh. Whiskey, a fine whiskey, you want to approach it like a fine perfume or wine. You don't want to shock yourself. That will help it be less harsh. Also, the second, third, fourth taste is always less harsh too. So that helps. Keep drinking.
If anything, I would also add that one of the biggest things to watch out for quality of whiskey is also sweetness. If it's overly sweet, they probably got something to hide. Just like you just think about food, you know, and all these other categories out there, the sweetest stuff sometimes is usually the lower the quality, and they're usually trying to mask, you know, some off flavors. Or if you're talking about like blended whiskeys, they might be blending in some neutral grain spirits just to like get the ABV up, but they'll usually put some sugar in there to cover that up. So
could be, yeah. Like
could
for
be.
Like, I mean, Fireball is like one of the best selling spirits in America. That couldn't be more harsh to me. Like it's cloying, it's high proof, that's harsh to me. But to millions of college kids, it's like the easiest thing to drink. So it's really, it's hard to question and answer. But I think in general, it's the whiskey that we're making is premium and refined. I hope it's not harsh, but if it does taste harsh, a lot of that is just the approach. So when you taste a whiskey, you do, like I said, you want to look at the glass you just want to get the perfume off it and sip it. So one of the things you don't want to do with wine is stick your nose deep in it, because wine is of course not the same ABV that you would get in whiskey. So you don't want to stick your nose in it and just be like, whatever. You just want to get a nice perfume off it and sip it. And I think you'll have better luck with it in that case. So you just have to be a little bit more, approach it in a very different thing, approach it more delicately than I would other drinks. If you're drinking a nice whiskey like these are high-end, very beautiful whiskeys. So that's how I would approach it. But the harshness can come from either it's literally harsh, like for me, like I said, Fireball is harsh, or it could be like quickly doing it, like your ice cream brain freeze, like I mentioned earlier. It could be that. And also very interestingly, again, bringing back up the researchers in Pennsylvania, they found that depending on the kind of music or the day or the stress you had will affect your palate as well. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on in your brain to affect how you relate to what's going on in your mouth.
And then I don't know if this is an alias or what, but Galaxy Tab A would like to know if you've ever, this is a bit of a gotcha. They want to know if you've ever tasted Minor Case Rye and what your assessment would be of it. This is actually a rye out of Lime Branch Distillery, if you know those guys.
I haven't tasted Minor Case Rye. Where is it from?
Lime Branch, I think it's their distillery.
Try it. I'll give it a try this week. Interestingly, just so you guys know, it's funny, people like ask that a lot. I haven't tried that yet. There are now 1,875 whiskey brands, craft whiskey brands. So I haven't made it through all of them, I have to admit. But now I will keep an eye out for it. Is it a recommendation?
I have one more question. Can you talk about aging? Like you see like cheese and they say aged, 4 years, and you mentioned one of your whiskeys was aged 4 years. You didn't mention the aging on the others. How important is aging? Because I just looked in my cabinet and we have a bunch of bottles that are aged 12 years. Nobody drinks them, but they're just sitting there. And is that really important?
I'm so glad you asked that. I'm sorry I didn't address that. Age is very important, yes, because whiskey's sitting in the cask. And so over time, it's evolving flavor in that cask. So age is very, very important in a whiskey. And younger whiskeys have certain flavors. 4-year-old whiskeys have certain flavors. 12-year-old whiskeys have certain flavors. 20, 30, 40, 50. It's called maturation. And yeah, so aging has a lot to do with it. And in the umbrella term of whiskey, around the world, though, how aging works is very different. It's going to be also a function of, have the casks been used before? And what are the grains used in that whiskey? Okay. Are you with me on that? So in American whiskey, a straight bourbon has to be aged 2 years. So that's when we start to see like really nice flavors develop and mellowness. Then there's 4 years is kind of another benchmark. Then it goes to 10 or 12. Now 12 years is when whiskey gets tricky. It can get too, it starts to turn. You don't want it too long in a cask, and then it gets trickier and trickier. A whiskey 25 years old, a bourbon, it's not going to be good. So think about that tea bag. Remember, American whiskey, brand new oak. So a lot of flavor quick into the whiskey. And then that barrel is mellowed out. We send that over to Scotland, Ireland, Japan. Other countries take those casks and they can use them. But now it's the second dunk of the tea bag. So guess what? Scotch whiskey is young at 12 years old, where that's old for an American whiskey and older. So age is very much a part of whiskey. And when you see, for example, age statements, you can see all these up behind me, they'll have it, and you see an age statement, 12, 4, straight means 2 in America, 30 in Scotland. You don't see 30-year-old bourbons that would taste like wood biting into the side of a tree, because again, it's the first dunk of that tea bag in the cask. That is a promise to you that none of the whiskey in there has been in a cask less than the age that you see on the bottle. So if you see 12, it's your promise. It's a promise to you that says nothing in this bottle is less than 12 years old. Nothing in this bottle is less than 4 years old. That's what that means. It means that everything in there is at least that age. And so you see around the world that age statement becomes very important. Now, what's happening in American whiskey, you don't see that age statement much. It's called NAS, non-age statement whiskey. That generally means that the whiskey is probably under 2 years old. Doesn't mean it's bad. You got to taste it for yourself. We only make straight, which means it's a minimum of 2. That's to me, I prefer like American whiskeys. They need to be at least 2 years old if they're coming from Texas or Indiana rye. 4 if it's Kentucky, Tennessee, and then if I'm in Scotland, I'm looking at least 12 years old for something that I tend to like, and maybe more.
Can you speak, Heather, to her bottles in her cupboard, though? And the difference between aging in your warehouse and in casks versus aging in a bottle?
Oh, thank you. Okay. So whiskey doesn't age in a bottle. You're good. So that 12-year-old is what it aged in a cask. So that 12-year-old whiskey in 10 years is still 12 years old.
Okay. Thanks.
Yep. It's Matt. Any other questions? Let me ask you guys, what did you like best? Oh, it's gone. Rye. Is that the rye? Okay. Megan, did you did the fruit? What did you think?
Good. I like it best with the triple cask.
The orange?
Yeah, I did an orange rind, and I like it with the triple cask more than the rye. I don't know why, but I just.
You have a good palate, because that's what we pair it with too. The triple cask, not the rye. Yeah. Good. I like that. The grapefruit, do it with a rye.
Okay.
Yeah. It makes a difference. It's amazing. Fruit will make a difference.
I like it better with the orange in it. For me, because I'm a novice.
A novice doesn't. You still have a tongue and a life. It's okay. I love novices have a purity in their way of tasting. Any other any other whiskey comments?
I've been scrolling through the pictures. It looks like a lot of rye fans. A lot of folks into that. Yeah.
Interesting.
Charlie and Renee into the rye.
I love it. You know,
I think
it's
Rod and Susie Q into the rye.
now that could be for two reasons. One, it could be because you have a lot of wine drinkers who are used to like wine and tannins and that dark fruits and it could be that. It also could be that it's your third whiskey. The third whiskey always tastes the best. So I don't know. It could be either. Tomorrow, I'd love to see you guys switch it and see if it's still the same. Any other questions? You guys all, most complex, it is complex, yeah. So where is Alpine exactly?
It's in Portola Valley, right off the Interstate 280, up in the hills. Very scenic, very beautiful. It's a elite tennis and swim club.
Wait, what hills? Sorry, I don't know the highways or the hills.
Well, it's right outside of Palo Alto, but up in the hills.
Okay, gotcha. So
And
pretty.
If you're ever in that area, we have to go up there. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
And do
Really,
you all
really-
play tennis? These are all tennis players? The reason why I'm asking is like I said, I just moved to Austin and there's tennis courts in my neighborhood. And I didn't have that in New York. So now I have to learn how to play tennis. I got a tennis racket for my birthday.
Ooh.
You might have been New York. They just didn't have any nets.
Yeah, we had a handball. I didn't do that. So I'm really, really excited. Look, you guys, you guys have had lots of information from me. Now I need one tennis tip. Any? No? Oh, you guys are a shy bunch.
Play double.
Watch the ball. Oh, watch the ball. Okay.
And
I have a question.
very
Yeah.
social.
I have a question. Do you guys have tours at your distillery?
We do. If you guys came, we're tiny, but if you guys came down, we would totally take care of you.
Yeah, we're good for a trip to Austin every couple years. We'll come visit.
Pack winter clothes just in case. I don't know. You never know.
That's right.
Pack your winter clothes. Yeah. So okay. So watch the ball. Where do you hold the racket? A tip or? I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you guys know how it goes. Should I bring? Can you bring whiskey on the courts?
At
It's all fair.
Alpine.
That's great. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you, Charlie and Renee, Karen, Wendy, Galaxy, Greg, Paul, Chris. Oh my God, Susie Q, Ken. Thank you.
Especially Jesse and Rosalie for putting it together. Thank you so much, guys, for organizing.
The whole thing
Very
together.
much.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And if you want to reach me, if you have any other whiskey questions, please reach out to Rosalie or Matt and any of the team in California that we work with. And you can ask me any questions. We are available at your local retailer now in California. And I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you. We're a small business. And now we got 2 slapdowns, COVID and the Texas, whatever you want to call what was last week. So we appreciate all the support for small business, but not only that, for any small business around you. I now tell everybody to support small businesses because they are the lifeblood of this country. Small food, small wine producers, small grocers. Really, I mean, it's amazing. Like I'm all local now. Small business in America.
Where can I buy
And you
your
guys are
book,
getting
Heather?
you guys are getting a first taste. Actually, it just became available in California for the first time ever, like 4 or 5 months ago.
Yeah.
Sure.
If you don't see it at your local retailer, ask them.
Can anybody hear me?
Yes, hi,
Yes,
Jessica.
you're good.
I just wanted to let you see everybody. Everybody wave. Everybody wave. We have a great group here. Okay. I wanted to also thank you so much for this presentation. It's been wonderful. And I actually want to thank a couple people here at Alpine who have made this an amazing event. Elizabeth, our Assistant General Manager. Hi. Margarita, our head of the bar.
Hey, Margarita.
Hi. Oh, there she is working.
Megan, I'm coming in to introduce you all to Megan. This is Megan Ritter. She was instrumental in putting this together. And this is our new general manager. This is Jamie Blattman. And another amazing person. This is Domingo, who put together all the, worked really hard on putting together the event at Alpine. I just want to really recognize all those people who really worked hard to put this together. And thank you for your time, you guys.
Wow. I'm
Thank you
so
much.
honored. Thank you. I hope you had a good time drinking whiskey and learning a little about whiskey from the ultimate whiskey nerd. Great. So when I'm next, I'll be in California, I hope in the next year, within soon. And I will come by and we'll do like maybe some sort of like whiskey tasting for you guys. Like let's do a live, let's do this live.
Yes.
Where did we buy your book?
Let's do it live. Maddie, can we organize this to do it live when I get there this
We
year?
would love to have you here.
Okay, that'd be really fun. I would
Of
love
course,
it.
absolutely.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone. Happy Women's Month. This is a celebration of Women's
Quick
Month.
question, can I
Yeah.
get the background you are using for my Zoom? That's actually my real whiskey collection. Yeah. So are you planning any DC area tours? Quick question, a couple quick questions I just will answer. We'd love to do this with our firm. Yes, my family's in DC. So I don't, Susie Q and Rod and everyone. Yeah, I'm in Washington, DC in March and April. So, milemandgreenwhiskey.com. You can find us through there. You can find me there. If you order the whiskey, you can get it shipped from California to your house. And if you want to reach out to me personally and you want to do something with your company or another tasting with your firm, or you want me to come and do a book signing and tasting, I am on Instagram. Very easy, at The Whiskey Authority. Okay, so just go to Instagram at The Whiskey Authority and you can DM me there. I'm pretty active on that. Okay. Thanks everyone. Bye.